I never imagined I'd be in this situation. I always saw myself as a guy who knew right from wrong, someone who understood what a solid marriage looked like. My life, my relationship, it was all built on what I thought was a strong foundation. Sure, there were things I could handle, things that were just part of the deal, but betrayal? That wasn't even in my realm of possibilities. It wasn't something I ever considered would happen to me. It wasn't a part of my world. Betrayal was something that happened to other people, not to me, and definitely not in my marriage. But life has a funny way of knocking you off balance when you least expect it. You think everything is solid, that nothing could ever shake the foundation you built. I really thought we had an understanding. She knew what kind of man I was, what I stood for, and what I expected from her and from us. I wasn't the kind of person to ignore red flags or let things slide, but the idea that she would break my trust never crossed my mind. It just didn't seem possible. I always thought I could read people, especially her. I wasn't naive or blind to the world, at least, that's what I believed. Relationships falling apart? That was other people's problem, not mine. Looking back now, I can see I was too sure of myself. Too confident that everything was fine. You go through life thinking there won't be any surprises, that everything is steady. But then something comes out of nowhere and hits you harder than you could have ever prepared for. The first sign should have been her friend. They were close, inseparable really. If you asked me back then, I would have told you they were like sisters. Always together, always texting, always hanging out. I didn't mind it. I thought it was good that she had someone like that in her life. But one day, everything changed. I never got the full story, she wasn't too keen on talking about it. All I know is that they had some kind of huge falling out. My wife was upset for days. When I asked her what had happened, she just kept saying it wasn't her fault, that her friend had betrayed her. Over and over, she repeated the same thing, it wasn't my fault. I believed her. I had no reason not to. We'd been together long enough that I trusted her word without question. As I came to find out later, this wasn't just some petty fight between friends. It was a disaster at work that led to her losing her job. Apparently, her friend threw her under the bus over a major mistake, shifting all the blame onto my wife. She got fired because of it. Losing a job is one thing, but losing a job because someone you trusted stabbed you in the back? That hit her hard. After that, she was never the same. She became more closed off, more guarded, especially with people outside of our relationship. I remember her telling me, "You're the only one I can trust now." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We had always been each other's rocks, or so I thought. But once someone's been betrayed like that, it changes them. And as it turns out, it changes everything. Things slowly started to improve for her after a while. She found a new job, and I remember how happy she was about it. It felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Every day, she came home smiling, talking non-stop about her new workplace and the people she worked with. She seemed genuinely happy for the first time in a long time. At the time, I thought this was a good sign, like maybe she was finally moving on from the betrayal she'd faced with her old friend. She started telling me all about her new colleagues, dropping their names like I should know them too. She had this particular fondness for a couple of them, but it was always vague. She just referred to them as the team. She'd laugh about their jokes and tell me stories about how they worked together on projects. Honestly, it felt like she was finally coming out of the shell she had built around herself after losing her job and friend. At first, I was glad. I wasn't much of a talker, but I enjoyed listening to her ramble on about her day. I thought it was her way of reconnecting with people, of learning to trust again. But then I started noticing something was off. She was too excited, almost overly eager, whenever she talked about her new coworkers. At first, I brushed it off, figured she was just thrilled about having a fresh start, rebuilding her confidence after everything she'd been through. But it didn't take long for that odd feeling in the pit of my stomach to grow. I couldn't quite place it, but something just didn't feel right. It was the way she lit up when she talked about work, like she couldn't wait to get back there the next day. Who gets that excited about their job every single day? I chalked it up to the fact that this was her first real break after such a rough patch. Maybe this was what she needed to feel like herself again. Still, deep down, I started questioning things. Looking back now, I realize that's where it all began. The change in her demeanor, her constant chatter about her colleagues, the way she seemed more invested in her job than in our life together, it was all leading somewhere. I just didn't know it yet. I should have seen the signs, but I didn't. I thought I was overthinking it, letting my mind play tricks on me. But sometimes, your gut knows the truth before you do. As time passed, she started to change even more. It wasn't obvious at first, just little things here and there. She became colder, more distant. The woman who used to rush home to tell me all about her day was now barely interested in what I had to say. Conversations grew shorter, and even when I spoke, it felt like her mind was somewhere else. Something was off, and I wasn't going to ignore it forever. One evening, I decided to confront her. I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was fine when I knew something was wrong. I'm not the kind of guy who beats around the bush, so I told her straight up, "You've been acting different lately. Distant. Cold." I wasn't accusing her of anything, I just wanted to know what was going on. If something was bothering her, I felt like I deserved to know. After everything we'd been through, we should have been able to talk about it. Her reaction, though, caught me off guard. Instead of getting defensive like I half expected, she reached out, took my hand, and looked me in the eyes. "I've never really had close friends," she said softly. "I've always struggled with that. But now, with this new job, it feels like I finally belong somewhere. I'm finally part of something." She paused, then asked, "Don't you want that for me?" I didn't know what to say at first. Yeah, I understood. After what happened with her old friend and losing her job, she deserved to feel connected to people again. She needed to feel like she fit in somewhere. But something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. It was almost like she was trying to justify something deeper, something she wasn't saying outright. Still, I didn't push it. I wanted to trust her, so I let it go. "Yeah, I get it," I told her. "But don't spread yourself too thin." She smiled at that, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. It felt more like she was brushing me off. Like she was keeping something from me. But what could I do? I let it slide, thinking maybe I was just overthinking things. At that point, I had no real reason to doubt her, no solid proof that anything was wrong. But after that conversation, things didn't get better. She wasn't as cold as before, but there was still this distance between us that I couldn't shake. It was like she was holding part of herself back, like I wasn't getting the whole story anymore. Whenever I asked her how work was going, her answers became shorter, less detailed. The excited, detailed stories about her colleagues were gone, replaced by generic, vague responses. I couldn't help but wonder if it was something I said. Maybe my comment about her being distant pushed her further away. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. Something was changing, something I couldn't put my finger on. It wasn't just about work or her new friends. It was bigger than that, and I could feel it creeping up on me, though I couldn't yet see the full picture. Then, she started coming home later than usual. At first, it was just once or twice, but soon, it became a regular thing. When I asked her about it, she always had an answer. It was team-building events, networking, after-work drinks. There was always something work-related. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I didn't push too hard. I told myself that maybe she was just trying to fit in with her new colleagues, trying to rebuild the trust she had lost after what happened with her friend. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Why did she suddenly need to stay out late for these events? Work is work, but this felt like something else entirely. And, of course, every time I asked her directly, she brushed it off with the same explanations. "It's just what we do at the company," she'd say. "Everyone's involved. It's good for morale." I wasn't buying it, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't have enough to accuse her of anything. Not yet, anyway. Then one day, she hit me with something new. She came home after one of her late nights and casually mentioned, "My friends at work think I should see a therapist." I remember staring at her, trying to make sense of what she just said. "A therapist? For what?" I asked her directly, "Why would you need a therapist?" She shrugged like it was no big deal and said, "Just to help me clear my head, get things straight up here." She tapped her temple as if I was supposed to understand what she meant. That's when I really started to get suspicious. "Clear your head from what?" I asked, repeating her words. From where I stood, everything seemed fine, or at least it should have been. If something was wrong, I figured we'd talk about it together, work through it as a team. That's what marriage is about. You don't need a therapist, I told her. You're fine. We're fine. But she looked at me like I just didn't get it, like I was missing some piece of a puzzle only she could see. You don't understand, she said quietly. It's not about being fine. It's about keeping everything fine. That's when I knew, deep down, something was seriously off. What did she mean by keeping everything fine? What was there to fix? As far as I knew, our life, our marriage, was okay, at least on the surface. But her talk about needing to clear her head felt like some kind of excuse. It didn't sit right with me, like she was setting up some story to justify whatever was going on in her mind. I didn't want to start a fight, so I dropped the issue, or at least I pretended to. But in my head, alarms were going off. I started paying more attention after that. If she needed a therapist, what did that say about us? Was there something wrong with our marriage that she wasn't telling me? I couldn't help but feel like this sudden interest in her mental health wasn't really about her emotions at all. It felt more like a distraction from something bigger, something she didn't want to talk about. After that conversation, things got worse. She became even more distant, and her behavior started to change in ways that didn't make sense for a married couple. She became obsessed with the idea of personal space and boundaries, something she had never talked about before. All of a sudden, that was all she seemed to care about. I need space, she would say. I need time for myself. It felt like I was living with a stranger. I didn't sign up for this. We were married for God's sake. Marriage isn't about setting up boundaries like we're roommates. It's about sharing your life, your space, your time. But she started treating me like I was just someone she lived with, not her partner. It was frustrating. The more she pulled away, the more it felt like I didn't even know who she was anymore. And then there was the phone. She was constantly glued to it, always texting someone, always checking her messages. She used to be so present with us, with me, but now it felt like I had to fight for her attention. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who are you always texting?" I asked, knowing that whatever answer she gave me, I probably wouldn't like. Without even looking up, she said, "It's my brother." Her brother. That's what she said. But I wasn't stupid. Sure, she had a brother, but they weren't close like that. They hardly ever talked. Now, all of a sudden, they were texting nonstop? It didn't add up. I knew something was going on, but what could I say? She had an explanation for everything, and I didn't have any proof. Not yet, anyway. The whole situation was eating away at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She was pulling away more and more, and every time I tried to talk to her, it was like hitting a wall. Her responses were short, vague, and it felt like she was just trying to end the conversation as quickly as possible. The connection we once had was gone, replaced by this cold, distant atmosphere that made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. And then the tipping point came. One day, she left her phone on the table while she went to take a shower. I stared at it, watching it light up every few minutes with notifications. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it. I wasn't the kind of guy to go snooping through her things. But that nagging feeling in my gut told me something was going on, something she wasn't telling me. So, against my better judgment, I picked it up and unlocked it. I didn't hesitate. I needed answers. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Right there, in her messages, was a notification from her so-called therapist. It wasn't just a simple reminder about an appointment, though. It was a full message, complete with details about their next session, including the time and place. As I stood there, phone in hand, everything started to fall into place. She had been going to these sessions regularly, and it wasn't just about clearing her head. There was something more to it, something she hadn't told me. The session was scheduled for later that day. That's when the idea hit me. I could follow her. She always walked to these sessions, saying it helped clear her mind, so I figured I could walk too, right behind her. If she wasn't going to tell me what was really happening, I'd find out for myself. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I wanted to see it with my own eyes first. I put the phone back where I found it, exactly as she left it, and acted like nothing had happened when she came out of the shower. She had no idea what I was planning. That afternoon, I waited. I watched her grab her bag, mention her therapy session, and head out the door like it was just another day. I gave her a few minutes, then slipped out behind her, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't suspect anything but staying close enough that I wouldn't lose her. My heart was pounding the entire time. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. She walked at a steady pace, completely unaware that I was following her. We went through a few blocks, and then she turned down a quieter street. That's when it happened. Instead of heading toward any office building, like I expected, she stopped at the side of the road and looked around. A sleek black car pulled up, and the window rolled down. I saw him. A guy I didn't recognize, but the way she smiled at him told me everything I needed to know. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen from her in a long time. She opened the car door and got in. That was all I needed to see. I stood there, frozen as the car pulled away. I didn't need to follow them anymore. I knew exactly what was going on. She wasn't going to therapy. She was meeting him. I was angry, of course, but more than that, I was hurt. I had trusted her, believed her, even when things didn't feel right. And now, I was standing there in the street, realizing that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. But I wasn't going to confront her right away. No, I had bigger plans. This wasn't just going to end with me asking her why. I wanted both of them to feel the consequences of what they'd done. I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not after everything. That night, while she was still out, I started making my move. I gathered up all her stuff, her clothes, her shoes, her makeup, everything. I shoved it into garbage bags, not caring if I was rough with her things. The whole time, my mind was racing. I felt this strange mix of anger and clarity, like everything finally made sense but in the worst possible way. I carried those bags out to the front yard and tossed them onto the lawn, not caring who saw. When she finally came home, I was sitting on the front porch, waiting. The second she saw the bags scattered across the lawn, her face went pale. She dropped her keys, running toward me in a panic. "What the hell is going on?" she screamed, her voice frantic. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Without saying a word, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. I'd saved it earlier, and I put the call on speaker. The other end rang twice before the guy's voice came through, calm and unsuspecting. "Hello." I leaned into the phone, keeping my voice steady. "Hey there. This is the husband of the woman you've been screwing." The silence on his end was priceless. I could almost hear him scrambling to gather his thoughts, trying to figure out how much I knew. But I didn't give him time to respond. "Congrats," I continued, my voice cold. "You've just contracted HIV. Better get yourself checked." The panic in his voice was immediate. What are you talking about?" he stammered, his voice shaking. But I didn't stick around to listen to his excuses. I hung up the phone, satisfied that I'd rattled him. By now, she was screaming, "What the hell is wrong with you? It's not what you think." But I wasn't done yet. I turned to her, calm as ever, and said, "Oh, it's exactly what I think. You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and now you're going to face the consequences. Pack your bags. Your stuff's already on the lawn. Get out." She kept yelling, kept trying to explain herself, but I wasn't listening anymore. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the guy who sat around and let this kind of betrayal slide. No way. She could cry, she could beg, but it wasn't going to change anything. This marriage was over. She tried to defend herself, saying, "Please, we can fix this. We can talk about it." But her words were empty. I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. I just shook my head and pointed toward the bags. "Take your stuff and go," I said, my voice firm. "This marriage is done. I'm filing for divorce, and there's no coming back from this." Her face crumbled as she realized I was serious. Tears streamed down her face, but I wasn't moved. I was done. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As she stood there sobbing, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few months lift off my shoulders. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for watching my videos, sharing them, and supporting me along the way. Your views, comments, and likes are the driving force behind my passion to create captivating and unexpected stories. Every tale I share is more than just a plot. It's a journey of emotions, lessons, and reflections that we experience together. Your engagement brings life and soul to this channel. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end of each video because the finale of every story is where the real impact lies. I promise to continue delivering twists and turns that surprise, inspire, and resonate with your hearts.